Good morning, everybody. Great to see all of you here. Thank you, band, for leading us today. Thank you. They're here at 6 o'clock in the morning, hauling their stuff in and getting ready for the. Mark always complains, the drummer. He says, why aren't you here at 6 o'clock hauling the equipment? Because I'm not playing it. That's why. If I was in a band, I'd play the harmonica. Just stick it in your pocket. You know, that's all you need. You play the drums, deal with it, all right? That's your problem, all right? It's good. Well, it's good to have all of you here. How's everybody doing? Good. I just love the story of the coach who was concerned about the toughness of his football team. So he said, I got to teach him how to be tough. And so he called the team meeting, and he was in front of the team, and he walked out in front of the team, and he walked out, and he had a little bucket, and right in front of the team, he just pulled his pants down, and he's standing there just in his underwear, and he reaches inside the bucket and pulls out an alligator, small alligator, and he attaches it right to his behind, and the alligator bites him right in the butt. And now he's just hanging there, holding on to his behind, and the guy's walking back and forth on the stage saying, this is the kind of toughness we need. This is what I'm talking about. If we're going to win games, and the alligator's just barely hanging on. And he says, you got to be tough. This is the kind of toughness I want on my team. Then he took his two fingers, poked the alligator in the eyes. The alligator let go. Then he held the alligator up and says, okay, who's next? It was deathly silent. He goes, who's next? Finally, a lineman raised his hand and said, Coach, I'll go next, but you don't have to poke me in the eyes to get me to let go. You love those linemen, don't you? Yeah. Well, I am glad you're here. We're going to talk about toughness today. That's what we're talking about. We're going to talk about toughness today, being tough. I never really heard a message like this growing up in the church, so if it's your first time at Foundations Church, really glad you're here. This is going to be really fun today, talking about how to be tough. We're in a series called Go Mad. MAD stands for Making a Difference, and we're going through the book, we're marching through the book of Nehemiah, where Nehemiah was living in Persia, working for the king, and all of a sudden he hears about his hometown, Jerusalem, which is in disarray. The walls have been burned down, the people are demoralized, and so he says, I'm going to go make a difference. And so he goes to Jerusalem and says, hey, we can't stand this. We can't live like this. You guys are better than this. Let's start building the wall. So last week we talked about how to take a group of people who aren't motivated, have no ambition in life, just really aren't going anywhere, and how to make them really do something powerful. And that's what Nehemiah did. He motivated those people, and they start building the wall. But here's what we need to know. Anytime we make a commitment to build, we're inviting a battle. If you're here today, say, man, I just kind of want to build up my relationship with God. Okay, that's good. That's noble. Expect a battle. If you're here today and say, man, I want to build my marriage. I want us to be tighter. We need to be closer. Good. That's a good thing. Guarantee you're inviting a battle. Closer family, anything you want to do. Anytime you're going to take a step to build something, you're inviting a battle into our life. That's okay. We just have to know how to battle. So today we're going to talk about how to fight. It's going to be fun. And so I'm in Nehemiah chapter 4. I'll go through this real quickly, what's happened in Nehemiah 4, and then we'll talk about it for the remainder of our time. So they start rebuilding the wall. Then all of a sudden, Sanballat, we heard about him before. He doesn't like Jerusalem or the Jews. He wants the city to be in disarray because he's profiting when the city is in disarray. When Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, he got angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of all his friends and in the army of Syria, he says, what are you feeble Jews doing? You're trying to restore the wall? You can't bring these stones back to life. It's burned, it's rubble. Then Tobiah, the Ammonite who was at his side, he started saying, look at this wall, because they started building already. He goes, even a fox, if he climbed on it, would break down this wall. And all these people are gathering around him. In fact, I can't do this because you're this way and I'm this way, but here's Jerusalem, and to the north of Jerusalem is the Samaritans. That's what Tobiah, they don't like the Jews. They're coming. To the east of them is the Philistines. They're attacking. To the west of them is Ammon, which is modern-day Jordan. There's a group attacking. And to the south, it says the Arabs are coming. They're surrounded. Do you ever feel that way in life? It's like everywhere you turn, you got problems. Do you ever have that? And that's exactly where they are. And so they're surrounded by all these people. And so when Nehemiah hears this, he gets angry and hears this prayer. Hear me, O God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. I like how he's praying. I've prayed like that. You know, when someone cuts me off, it's like, God, get him. Get that dude. That wasn't right. So he's praying. He's angry. Don't cover up their guilt, he says, or don't blot out their sins. He's angry. So then he says, let's keep rebuilding. So we rebuilt the wall till it reached half its height, for the people were still working with one heart. Then Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, all those people I talked about, they heard about the repairs, and they were upset. They plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to stir up trouble. So they're going to attack Jerusalem. Nehemiah says, but we prayed to God and posted a guard day and night around the walls. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the workers is giving out, and there's so much garbage around here, we can't rebuild the walls. And our enemies also said they're going to kill us and put the end to the work. Then the Jews said, what are we going to do when they attack us? Then Nehemiah says, I stationed some people behind the lowest points of the wall, posting them by families with swords, spears, and bows. And I says, don't be afraid. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight. Fight for your families and for your sons and for your daughters and for your wives and for your homes. And when the enemies heard that we were aware of their plot, that God had frustrated it, we all returned to the wall, each to our own work. And from that day on, half the people worked on the wall, and the other half had spears, bows, and shields. And they also put a guy with a trumpet. And whenever there was a problem around the wall, he'd blow the trumpet, and everybody would come there and say, let's fight off this attack that we're facing. And so they were working, half worked, and half were guarding the city. And then it says, those who carried the materials, the 2x4s and stuff, they had work in one hand, and they held a weapon in their other. I like that. They're building and battling. We'll talk about that today. And each of them were doing it. And the man with the trumpet stayed with Nehemiah so he could say, there's a problem. And they began to build. And so we continued working from when the sun came up until the stars came out at night. Every time, every day, every man worked at night and at day. And so the work of the walls of Jerusalem continued. It's just a great chapter. Really glad you're here. Welcome to Foundations Church. We're going to learn how to fight today. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, thank you. Thank you for being a really great, gracious, and good God. I pray today that no matter what we're facing in life, and some of us are facing some big, big challenges. Others of us are just kind of maybe in neutral, just kind of floating along. Others of us may be doing well. I pray wherever we're at in life that we would get a picture of you and see you, how big and awesome and great of a God you are. So no matter what challenge we have in our life, all of us as a result of being here today would be able to leave whatever challenge we're facing and say, it's well with my soul, because we serve a God who is great and awesome. Be with us in this time. For us in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I love C.S. Lewis, the writer. He tells a story about the devil having a garage sale, and all his tools that he has in his arsenal were being sold at this garage sale. And there's pride, and there's jealousy, and there's envy, and unforgiveness, and lust, all the stuff that you guys deal with. And the guy's looking at all the tools of Satan, and then he sees this one tool. It's really worn out. It's really, really, really worn out. And he goes, wow, this one's used more than ever. What is this? And the devil said, that's the tool I use the most. It's the most effective on people. It's the most effective. It's the tool of discouragement. And discouragement is a reality in life. You don't have to live long to know that life can be very discouraging. And the question isn't, are we going to be discouraged? The question is, do we have the tools to be able to fight discouragement? That's what we're going to have. So today I'm kind of excited about this, feel strongly about this, because I've seen firsthand the effects of discouragement. I was raised, I have two brothers, and my dad was kind of a passive dad. My dad never taught us how to fight. We didn't know how to fight very well. And I think the consequences of that are most manifested in my oldest brother. My oldest brother, people say that my oldest brother is the best looking in the family. That is hard for me to imagine. They say he was the best athlete. He was a great athlete. He could run fast. He was a great hurdler, great basketball player. He played baseball very well. He was a Golden Glove boxer, almost went all the way to the end. But every time something happened in my brother's life that was discouraging, he didn't have the fight to push through it. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. He was a pretty good student, but something happened in school, and he just got angry and discouraged, and he dropped out of high school. Just dropped out, never finished. Was dating a gal. He was madly in love with her, and he got angry one night, and she broke up with him, and he never recovered from that. He just bottomed out. Just bottomed out, and his life was just spiraling down, so he joined the Army. And he was doing well in the Army for a while, but again, he had some drill sergeant, I don't know what it was, but someone got mad at him, and he got sideways with the guy, and then he just went AWOL and never came back, dishonorably discharged from the Army. Went from job to job to job, and whenever he got sideways with somebody or something happened discouraging, he would just quit. And if it really wasn't for really the compassionate heart of my other brother, the second one in the family, my second brother owned a construction company and hired my younger brother. And my younger brother, the second brother, whatever. I know what I'm saying, but you guys don't, but just follow me, okay? All right? And my brother just had pity on him, and he hired him, but all the time he was just a pain. He was just a pain in the behind to my brother. But he kept my brother going at least until construction work just kind of just went dry in Ohio. And so my brother took his business to Florida, where he's doing very well. But to move in a house, to move to Florida for my older brother, that was too much for him. He got discouraged. Why would you do that? Why'd you do that? And so now my brother's just back home. And it's sad. It's just the saddest thing in my life. It's just, look at my oldest brother, living in the town that we grew up in, which was great when we were growing up, but now it's a ghetto. He bought his house for $100,000. Now it's worth $18,000. It's just a ghetto. He does nothing but sits in his house. He's an absolute recluse, and he's drinking himself to death. Just drinking himself. He's got this unbelievable hernia that's just like, I won't tell you, but it's nasty. I was like, go get it fixed, man. Get it fixed. He used to be such an active guy. And he just drinks himself to death. And it's like, here's a guy who had so much promise, so much going for him, just naturally talented and gifted. When you get to know his heart, he's got a great personality. But whenever he ran up to anything that was tough, he would just quit. He'd just quit. Because he never learned how to fight through grief, how to fight through disappointment, how to fight through anything. And then when my mom and dad passed away, he doesn't know how to fight through stuff. It's like, come on, man, get through this stuff. That's life. You got to be able to push through it. And he couldn't push through it. So I'm glad you're here today. We're going to talk about how to be a fighter. So we're going to look at Nehemiah chapter 4. We'll go through the first part real quickly, and then we'll talk about 5 ways to fight, okay? You ready to go? If you're ready, say, I'm ready. Good, I am too. Here we go. Number 1, okay, the tactics of opposition. We'll talk about the opposition that Nehemiah faced. We'll talk about the effect of it, and then we'll talk about how to fight. There's 3 tactics he fight. I'm still working through the book for future weeks, but there's 3 tactics we talk about today that every time Nehemiah did something, he fought. There's about a total of 9 in the whole book. Every time Nehemiah did something, opposition. Every time, opposition. But Nehemiah was a fighter. There's 3. The first one was ridicule. It says that in verse 1. When they heard about it, they ridiculed him, mocked him. Hey, who do you think you are? Ridicule. Sanballat came and started mocking him, and then some other people came. Have you ever noticed that negative people kind of hang out together? Have you ever noticed that? It's kind of contagious. So one people start mocking the Jews, other people start mocking them. Before you know it, they're surrounded by negativity. So you use ridicule. Number 2, it says in verse 6, resistance. Resistance. They came together and said, if these Jews build the wall, they'll be healthy, and that's not good for us. The people who are around Jerusalem. You know, there's some people who don't want us healthy. You know that? There's some people who just don't want us healthy. And so they face resistance. So they says, let's fight these guys so they don't get in a healthy place. And number 3 was rumors. They started spreading rumors around about these Jews. They're this, they're that, they're this. They're fighting against the king. We're going to take these rumors. You're rebelling against the king. Nehemiah worked for the king. The king sent him there with his credit card. But they're saying, they started all these rumors. I wrote 2 things in our notes about rumors, 2 characteristics. One is they are always spread by those who are closest to the opposition. That's where rumors come from. Those who are closest to the opposition. And number two, they are exaggerated the more they are repeated. Anytime we're going to do a project, the negativity always gets exaggerated. That's just the way life is. And every time you're going to start something, people will exaggerate all the negative challenges to it. And so these are the things that Nehemiah had to face. And so the effect of the opposition, here it was. This is what happens in verse 10, 11. It's in your notes there. It says this. Once they heard all this stuff, the strength of the laborers is giving out. There's so much rubble around here, we can't rebuild the walls. Our enemy says, we'll be right there among them and kill you. And so the effect of all this was discouragement. That was the effect, discouragement. This whole town that was now excited last week and they're starting to build the wall are surrounded by negative people who are opposing them, and now they're all discouraged and they're saying, you know what, we can't do it. In fact, it says here, I got it in your notes, it says in verse 6, when did this occur? In verse 6 it says this, when the wall was halfway built, when it reached half its height. That's a good point. Because that's when discouragement is at its peak, when we're halfway done with something. Halfway. I was reading about marriage and divorce rates. You have the highest point of divorce in your first 8 years of marriage. And then divorce rates go down. Every year after that. After 8 years, it starts going down. And then it spikes a little bit when the kids leave the house. It's like, oh no, I got to talk to you now. Oh no. Okay? And around halfway through a marriage, that's a tough time. Halfway through a career, a guy will work and work and work and work and work, and then he'll say, you know, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to grow my hair, get an earring, get a Harley, and ride. That's what I want to do. How many guys that sound appealing to, by the way? Yeah, that's it, okay? There's this phenomena in the United States called a midlife. Yeah, you go through halfway, something's like you don't want to do it. It's like, that's it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be with this person anymore. I think I could be happier with this person. I don't want to do this career anymore. I'm tired of it. I just don't want to do it. And then halfway through, and all this opposition is happening, and now halfway through the project, the Jews say, we don't want to do this anymore. And the intent is in verse 11, where it says this. The enemy says, let's continue to oppose them, so we'll put an end to their work. That's the end game. That's the end game of the opposition, is to get us to quit. Quit the marriage, quit the career, quit this, quit that, quit this. Just quit. And it happens around halfway through something. Halfway. They just don't want to do it anymore. So Nehemiah says, okay, this is what happens. You build, and now all of a sudden you're inviting a challenge, you're inviting a battle. So now I have to have a strategy on how to fight. So there's 5 things Nehemiah does in this chapter that rallies the people and rallies them so much that they overcome this opposition and continue to move on. That's what we need to do in life. Here's a question to ask. What does it take to stop me? That's a good question to ask. What does it take to stop me? Because eventually we're going to bump up against that thing, and we're going to have some tools to be able to push through that. 5 things Nehemiah did. Here we go. What do you do when you're under attack? What do you do when you're facing opposition? Number 1, rely on God. Rely on God. Nehemiah, last chapter, we were here last week, and he was excited, man. He got these people who were living in abject poverty. He got them motivated, and they're building a wall. He goes, way to go, way to go. Halfway through, now they stop. They just quit. Because they heard of the opposition. And here's what Nehemiah said. I read it earlier. But in verse 4 and 5, he goes this. The first thing he does is he prays to God. Hear this, O God. We're being despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them as plunder. Don't cover up their sins anymore. Don't cover their sins anymore. They have thrown insults in the face. Nehemiah's hacked off. He is angry. And what he's doing is he's going to God with his anger. So here's a MMs. That stands for a mad memo. Here it is. When ridiculed, don't take it out on people, talk it out with God. That's good, because here's what happens. Seen this happen so much. Is when we get opposed, our tendency is to get mad at the person. Now, it's okay to get angry. In fact, it's a command in the Bible. In Ephesians 4, it says this, be angry. That's a command. You know there are some things we should be angry at, wouldn't you agree? Some things we should be angry at. Be angry. But then it says, don't sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Be angry, but don't sin. So Nehemiah is angry, but he's taking it to God. Now here's what happens. Instead of taking it to God, we take it out on people. We think people are the problem, and we turn our anger towards the person. And then what happens, instead of being angry, we're locked in a state of anger. That's dangerous. Do you know people like that? Locked in a state of anger. That's my brother. He's locked in a state of anger. He pushes everybody away. I'm the only person crazy enough to stay in my brother's life. So when I go back home to Cleveland, I'll take him out because he's a recluse. And I'll say, let's go to the Indians game. Let's watch the Cleveland. They stink. Well, okay, let's get a nose guard. Let's go. We're playing. We're going. So he drives. We're pulling out of the parking lot. And in Colorado, it's an amazing thing that happens in Colorado. I went to an Eagles game. You guys go 1 and 1 and 1 and 1. It's amazing. We don't do that in Cleveland. So he's driving, and this guy cuts him off, and he's like flipping the bird to the guy. I go, would you settle down? I'm a pastor, man. You can't be doing this stuff. The guy's a jerk. And he's like screaming at the guy. He's like, and my brother is just stuck in a state of anger, and that's why everybody around him is on like eggshells, because they have a reservoir of anger, and one little thing taps into that reservoir, and bam, they like kill an ant with a hammer. And so when we're angry, we have to take it to God so he can deal with our anger. It's not people. And I wrote in my notes, when we face opposition, focus on the mission and ignore the ridicule. Most of us do the opposite. We focus on the ridicule and forget our mission. Nehemiah says, let's take our anger to God. It's not about people, it's about God. And so he takes his anger to God. And so don't take it out on people, talk it out with God. Number 2, respect the opposition. The opposition's real. So Nehemiah says, okay, here's what we're going to do. These guys are intent on killing us. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take some workers and pull them off the job, and you guys are going to carry swords and spears with you, and we're going to put you around the wall. He's respecting the opposition. That's what he's doing. And so then he says, half of you are going to guard the wall, and the other half are going to pray. I like that. That's what Jesus says. I have it in your notes in Matthew. It says, watch and pray. That's a good combination. Watch and pray. If you get sick, here's a good combination. Pray and take medicine. I used to live in the inner city, and houses were getting broken in all the time, and I had my little girls there, and here's what I would do at night. I would pray that God would protect our house, and then I'd lock the doors. You got to do both. Does that make sense? You got to do both. You got to watch, and you got to pray. That's what you got to do. And that's what he's telling them to do. Take them seriously. Take them seriously. And so he's doing it. He says, and in verse 9, he says this. I like this about him. He says, we prayed to our God, and we posted guards. So he says, he's doing it too. Nehemiah is not a guy who's removed from doing this stuff. He goes, I'm going to do it. So he's praying, and he's posting. He says, we're going to do it. We're going to watch, because we've got to take the opposition very seriously. And number 2, we're going to pray. We're going to pray. Number 3, reinforce our weak points. Reinforce our weak points. And here's what he says in verse 13. Sometimes the wall's built this high, but other places it's really low. So wherever we're weak on the wall, we're going to put extra guards there to guard it. We're going to make sure we know where we're weak and vulnerable, and we're going to protect that. Here's what I wrote in your notes under a mad memo. Difference makers know where they are vulnerable. They know where they're vulnerable. And it's important that we know where we're vulnerable. When I was doing corporate training, man, I was flying all over the country. And I'd be like on 3 or 4 flights like a week. I mean, it was brutal travel. And I'd meet other people who were doing it, but we all did it alone. I met this one guy who was a guy who loved God, and he just talked about his marriage going down the drain because he lost his marriage because he was addicted to pornography. And they just couldn't deal with it anymore. She couldn't deal with it anymore, and so she just left. And I remember talking to this guy. He says, man, I need to get this right. I don't want to have this habit continue to sabotage my relationships. It just has a grip on my soul. And so he said, can you do me a favor? And I said, what? And he says, every time I check into a hotel, I want to call you on my cell phone, and then I'm going to pick up the hotel phone, and you could hear, and I want you to hear me tell the front desk to cut those channels off my cable. And we had an agreement for like 3 or 4 years. Wherever Joe went, he flew. And sometimes it was hard, because sometimes I'd be on the East Coast, he'd be on the West. He'd call me like 11:30 at night. It's like, oh, geez, whatever, Joe. Okay, all right. I go, yeah. And he goes, hold on. And he'd tell me. I go, can't you just tell me? He goes, no, because I'd lie to you. I want you to hear me talk to the manager. I say, okay. And we do it. And that was smart. That was smart. And here's what Nehemiah is doing. It says this. He says, I'm going to put you, I'm going to put the guards by the wall in their families. And I like that. He says, because whenever we're in a battle, we should never battle alone. Because we're very susceptible. So my friend Joe, he built an accountability structure, and every time he checked into the hotel, he'd call me. Every time. Hold on, Carl, listen to this. And I'd hear him. And so that's what we have to do. We have to build and battle at the same time. Now, here's what I know about me, because the way I was raised in a church, and I get building. I know how to do that, building, loving, caring, encouraging, forgiving, showing love. I got that, but I don't know how to battle. I never learned how to battle. In my family of origin, and we never learned how to battle. And that has hurt me in my life. That has hurt me, because there's times battling means drawing boundaries, standing up for yourself, speaking truth. Don't get walked on like a doormat. Are you all tracking with me? We need to know how to do that, because this world is hard and tough. And a couple years ago, when my kids were just real young, they're still young, but they were real young. My wife and I, we were working real hard, and we were just like, our family was just like just going in. And so I got up one morning, I said, hey, tonight after work, look, we've been going so fast. Well, I'm going to spend some money. We're going out in the family. We're going to have a real nice night. We're going to spend some money. She goes, really? I go, yeah. So that night we're at Chick-fil-A, and that's a good place. I don't know why you guys would laugh. It's got a place for kids and stuff. And so it's a nice family night. And we get the booth right by the play area. And we're talking and the kids are playing. And I'm watching this dynamic develop. Because my littlest boy is Lukey. And Lukey's going down the slide. And every time he'd go to the bottom slide, there's this big kid, really big, would scream like a tiger in Lukey's face. And Lukey would get scared. And so Lukey did it again. And the kid did it again. And Lukey started crying. And I'm watching this. So Caleb, who's just, his brothers are just a little bit bigger than Lukey, not much. Caleb goes with long brother and says, come on. And I can watch him. He says, I'll take you up the slide. And so my wife and I were watching this. So Caleb takes him up the slide. Lukey goes down, and the kid does a tiger thing again. Lukey starts crying. And so Caleb puts a finger in that bigger kid's face, and he's like yelling at him in the play area. And my wife looks at me, and she says, are you going to do something about this? And I looked at her and I says, like what? Say, good job. Way to go. And down the toilet goes our family night. That was not a smart thing to say. I mean, it's like, we wrecked that. Well, whatever, okay. Now we're fighting. And it's like, and I'm not good at it either. It's like, I don't know what to do here. But I want my kids to know that this is a tough world. And you have to know how to build, and you have to know how to battle. And you have to know how to do both. There are some people, I've met them, they battle all the time. You know people like that? Here's what you do with them. I mean, anytime you do something wrong, they're on you. You just can't be bent towards battle all the time. You're going to push people away from your life. You'll stand up for yourself, but that's all you'll have is yourself. So you have to know how to do both. You have to know how to build and battle, and that's what I want my boys to know how to do. I don't want Caleb to punch the kid in the nose. I wouldn't ever, but I do want him to stand up for himself. We got to build and battle. That's how life is. We have a little garden in our backyard, and I don't know how to garden because I'm a city boy, but I'm finding out to have a good garden, you know what you have to do during the summer? You have to build, water, fertilize, blah, 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 okay? And then you have to battle. You got to fight those weeds, man. They're omnipresent. You got to fight. Your body has red blood cells, which are meant to build and to nourish and heal your body. And they have white blood cells, which are meant to fight and battle. And your body's like in perfect balance. And if you get too much of one or the other, you're a really sick dude, physically speaking. And so you got to learn to build and battle at the same time. I was raised in a church. I learned a lot about building. I never learned much about battling. And you need to know how to battle. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a pastor in Germany during Nazism. And the church did nothing. The church did nothing when the Nazis were just marching in and doing horrendous and horrific stuff. And Bonhoeffer says this, when they came for the communists, I said nothing because I wasn't a communist. When they came for the Jews, I said nothing because I wasn't a Jew. And when they came for me, there was no one to speak for me because no one was left. And they killed them. They killed them. To be a healthy person, you have to learn how to build. And you have to learn how to battle. And you have to learn how to do both equally well. If you're going to have a thriving marriage, you know how you have to build up that marriage. You have to know how to love and forgive and care and encourage and all that stuff. You have to know how to do that. And there's times you're going to have to learn how to battle, fight for your marriage, fight for your family. There's times you have to. You have to do both. And Nehemiah said, okay, he says, here's what we're going to do. He says, we're going to put people to build. And then he says this, I love this, later on in the chapter, he goes, and the people who are bringing materials to the wall, he says, here's what you do. You carry materials in one hand and a weapon in the other. I like that. 2x4s and a trowel in one hand and a sword in the other. That's a good picture for how we should do life. It's pretty good. And wisdom knows when to use both. Build and battle. Sad to say, I'm learning, not good at it, not good at it, but learning how to battle late in my life because I never learned how to do it as a kid. So our MAD memo. Hey, Jody, did we cover that MAD memo under point 3? Did we cover that one? Oh, okay, let's go to point 4 then, shall we? Okay, point 4, renew ourselves. When you're discouraged, someone described discouragement as leukemia of the soul. So when you're discouraged, how do you renew yourself? How do you renew yourself? Well, that's interesting. I discovered this. When people were in battles, they found ways to renew themselves. During the Spanish-American War, the Spaniards sunk a ship. And so the Americans had this, the ship was called the Maine. And so to rally the troops, they would say, remember the Maine. When we got the Texas Revolution, when Mexico invaded Texas, to rally the troops, the U.S. troops said, remember the Alamo. During World War I, a German submarine sunk a luxury cruiser that had a bunch of Americans on it, and they died. It was one of the catalysts that would bring America into World War I. Anybody remember the name of that ship? Say it again. Lusa something. Look it up in Google, okay, all right? But during World War I, we said, remember the Lusa something, okay, all right? And then World War II. Remember World War II, Japan bombed. And during World War II, when we were fighting, we'd say, remember Pearl Harbor. And then lately you'll see these signs, you've all seen them. You'll see signs of the Twin Towers, and it says, we won't forget. We won't forget. Remember 9/11. That's how we motivate sometimes. All those things are losses, interestingly enough. Here's what Nehemiah does. When he goes to the people, he says this in verse 14. After I looked things over, I stood up over the people. They're all discouraged, and he says, don't be afraid. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. I like that. Because here's what I want to say today. Whatever you're fighting in your life, whatever you're fighting, and some of us here are fighting some big things. After the first service, some people came to me and told me what they're fighting. I mean, life and death, big time stuff. Here's what we need to know when we're facing opposition that's big and scary. Remember the Lord. Because whatever you're fighting is no battle for God. Whatever you're fighting, God is bigger than it. And that's why Nehemiah says, remember the Lord. Remember him, who is great and awesome. And so the mad memo is this: if I fear God, I won't fear anyone or anything else. That's a good thing to remember. That's a good thing to remember. If I fear God, I won't fear anything else in life. Whatever life throws at me, God is bigger than it. God is bigger than it. And because of my position as a pastor of a church, I'm able to sometimes go to sacred places. I've walked with people on their deathbed. I've been with people right on their deathbed. I've seen some amazing feats of courage on a deathbed. I've seen people just joyous and at peace because they know that even death, God is bigger than that. No matter what curveball life throws at you, no matter what sucker punch life gives you, bankruptcy, foreclosure, so you're rejected by your spouse, your kids are spinning out of control, health problems, all that stuff. Got it. Big time stuff. I get it. Scary stuff. I get it. But here's the deal. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, because he's bigger than any challenge you have. And number 5, refuse to quit. Refuse to quit. So when our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot and God had frustrated it, we all returned to work. I like that. We all returned to work. And then he says this: we all started working. And then he says we worked from the first light of dawn till the stars came out. That's a long day. They're putting in long days because now they're motivated. They push through the opposition. And that's the beautiful thing. When you push through some opposition, it motivates you to go to a higher level in life. It just does it. When your marriage is stuck, and then you have the guts and the courage to push through that stuff. Sometimes it may take counseling. Sometimes it may take all kinds of stuff. But when you push through that stuckness, you reach a higher level of intimacy. It's a beautiful thing. I have some great friends. I know my friend had an affair, and he felt so guilty, and he went to his wife and confessed it, and there was 2 years. It was brutal. Sleep in a different room. It was just brutal. But he said, I'm going to fight. I love that woman. I'm going to fight. And she was nasty and mean and hard and tough. And he kept fighting. I look at their marriage today, and it's one that I want to emulate. It's like, wow, how did they get a level of intimacy and camaraderie and friendship like that? It's beautiful. You know why? Because they kept their focus on God, who is great and awesome and gives you the resources to even overcome a betrayal. He could do it. That's how big our God is. So my friend who went through that, he had a build and he had a battle. And she said, get out. I'm not getting out, honey. I was building and battling. And they built something beautiful that I would want to emulate in my life. So a mad memo is difference makers never, ever, ever give up. Never give up. They just never do. They just keep going. They refuse to quit. It's good. Good for me to study this. This is good for me today because this is what I need. A guy who never learned to battle very well. Still learning this late in life. I was in Fort Collins with a couple of friends working, eating wings and watching sports. And so it was fun. It's fun. And a guy came up to me and said, are you Carl Sutter? And when anybody asks me that question, my temptation is to say, but I said, yeah. I said, yeah, I am. He goes, so you started that church. Not me, but I said, not me. A bunch of us did, but I'm part of it. He goes, yeah, I've heard about that, and I just want you to know that I don't think God will ever bless that place. Because I've heard some things, and I don't think God will ever bless that place. It's like, wow. Wow. So what do? You got your friends around, so you just say, well, thank you for your thoughts or whatever, He leaves and you pray, God, wrap his car on it. So, but I don't know, I don't know how to battle. I don't really know how. I'm learning, trying to learn. So, my friends are there, so you just keep a brave appearance, and I got in the car, and I put my put my head on the steering wheel. I just wept. It's like, wow, really? Really, someone wants to see this fail? I mean, it's like, really? You know, it's hard. It's like, wow, that hurts. That hurts. Have you ever been hurt so bad that you just want to like grow your hair long and get an earring and buy a motorcycle? Anybody here ever want to do that? Because if you call me, because I might join you. It's like, that's tempting. And I got in the car, and it's like I just wept, and it's like, oh, that hurts. Man, it hurts. So I called up my buddy who's known me for a long time. He knows my family, and I said, let me tell you what happened today. And he said, you know, Carl, this is good for you, because this is your Achilles heel. Whenever things get tough, you want to retreat. So use this to push through, to strengthen your resolve, to keep moving, to keep doing what God has called you to do. Do it. Don't let this stop you. And then he prayed for me on the phone, and that was nice. And I hung up the phone, and then I thought of my oldest brother, who's dying in Ohio, who's dying, he's killing himself because he doesn't know how to push through discouragement. And then I prayed, and I said, God, that was tough. That felt like a hit below the belt today. And you know what? I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm not. I have nothing against that person. I'm angry. I'm hurt. But you know what? I'm going to use this to push me further, to strengthen my resolve. I'm going to use this to learn how to battle, to be more effective at it. And I want a church that learns how to battle. So I'm going to close with my favorite illustration. I said it like 2 weeks ago at the 9 o'clock service, but I didn't tell the 11. I said, I got to tell the 11 this one. This is fun. It's my favorite one. It's about opposition. I have a friend who lives in New England, and they eat codfish out there, right out of the harbor. He says it tastes awesome, fresh codfish. And you could order at a restaurant, and he says it tastes like candy. And so the fishermen there wanted to create a market across the country. So what they would do is they would catch this codfish, and they would freeze it, and then they would ship it to all the parts of the country. But when they got to the restaurants, frozen codfish doesn't taste anywhere near as good as fresh. So wow, that's not good. So then what these fishermen did is they bought little aquariums, and they put the codfish in the aquarium and would ship it to Phoenix and Seattle and Denver, all these places. But when the codfish, when they got in the aquarium, they wouldn't swim. They would just lay on the bottom. And when they got to the restaurant, they were all mushy, and they didn't taste as good as fresh. So the fisherman says, that doesn't work. We got to keep them swimming. How do we do that? And so they figured it out. And here's how they literally ship codfish across the country today. Here's how they do it. They take a little tank, and they put some codfish in there. And they found out the natural adversary of the codfish is the catfish. And so they drop a catfish in the tank too. And the catfish changes them all around. Those codfish swim real fast. And when they get to the restaurant, they're really fresh and they taste really good. And here's what I believe. I believe God doesn't want any of us to get mushy and soft like my brother. So what God does, in his sovereign knowledge, he drops a catfish in our tank. Because he loves me so much, he's given me like 3 or 4. Just because God and I are so tight, you know, it's just like, love you, Carl. And there are days I curse or want to those catfish. But I want to tell you something. Those catfish are there for a purpose. It's to make us better, stronger, faster people. That's what it's all about. I want to be part of a church with people who know how to build and know how to battle. That's what I want to do. Are you ready to sign up? Let's pray. Let's pray together. So, Father, thank you. Thank you for what you do in our lives. You're a good God who is constantly working in our lives. Thank you for that. Thank you for the great example of a builder and a battler in Jesus Christ, who knew how to love like no one else and care, but also knew how to fight and not be deterred in his mission. Father, create in all of us here, all of us got battles of different sizes going on in our life. Teach us how to be builders so people always feel safe around us. Teach us to know how to build, to love and encourage and care for the people who matter to us most. And then I pray that you teach us how to be battlers too. How to fight for what's right. How to fight for what matters to us. How to fight against opposition when it doesn't have our best interests in mind. Father, use us today. Mold us to be builders and battlers. And as a church today, it's great to be together. We just collectively say, Father, you're a great God. And we want to close our time together by declaring to northern Colorado how great is our God. In Jesus' name we pray.